So this month's topic, we're talking about moving concierge, and it's a term that has sort of been coined in the last 2 years to have a specific meaning in the real estate vernacular. But in theory, what it means is where a real estate company will provide advice, guidance, skills, and sometimes money to prepare a home for sale. So lots of you are probably saying, well, I've already been doing this for years. All it means is that the corporations, especially the VC-backed corporations, are kind of diving into this part of the market and trying to use it as a differentiator. What's funny is in my firm, we've been rehabbing homes for over 10 years. And so we've been basically doing this, and all we had to do was sort of reframe it to make it a product that our agents could then go out into the marketplace and promote. And so I'm going to share with you kind of what it is, how you can do it, the degrees to which you can do it, and the benefits if you do decide to do something like this. So what we found is there's literally a continuum within the term moving concierge. So there are companies like in my market, Redfin is pretty huge here. They have a quote unquote moving concierge program. All it means is, hey seller, instead of our 1% listing fee, you're going to pay us 1.5%. And then we're going to use that money to clean up your house and do some landscaping or whatever. So I call that kind of the list ready level. And that's the same things that any of you would go to a retail seller, probably more so than a bank, and say, hey, before we want to put this on the market, in order to get the best first impressions, in order for the photos to look the best, here's what I would recommend, right? Cleaning, staging, maybe some landscape, some light paint, that sort of thing. Most companies that have a moving concierge program will at least do that. Then there's this middle level that I call prehab. So it's not a full rehab, but it's a prehab, which means do everything in the list-ready list, but also be willing to fix some things that maybe buyers would view as potential discount items, right? And the way I describe it to consumers, especially sellers, is approaches a home with list price in mind. I'm going to go ahead and mute someone else. They approach the home with the list price in mind, and then they see things, right? And they go, oh, discount, 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 discount. Now, obviously, in a white-hot market like we're in now, that's tempered, but it's still a reality, right? They walk in there thinking 500 grand, and they see that it needs new carpets. They immediately think, okay, 498 or 7 or whatever. So prehab solves those sorts of things, which can be a little more expensive than just carpet and paint, right? I wish I knew how to mute everybody efficiently. Now, rehab is the full meal deal, right? Oh, God, dang, I'm having a hard time. Right? Rehab is anything and everything if there's a return on investment, right? So this is your textbook as is, as repaired, valuations, scope of work calculation, and then does the increase in value pay for that scope of work, and is there a return, right? That's also the most cost prohibitive, right? Because it costs the most amount of money. But the beauty of that channel of this sort of business is that that person can do all three, right? And you're able to go into a person's home or an asset manager's asset and say, here's what I recommend. Here's what you could sell it for as is, but here's what I would fix because it's going to give you this ROI, right? And that could be a little list, like a prehab list, or a full list, just depends on what the home needs, right? And what does the surrounding neighborhood support, right? Good. We're all good at making recommendations. We're all good at looking at comps and going, okay, none of the comps have granite countertops. I'm not going to suggest my client put in granite, but I am going to suggest quartz, or I am going to suggest, Corian or some lower level of quality, depending on what the market supports, right? It's the exact same analysis. But here's the real difference. Here's the power of the moving concierge. This program allows my agents and myself to walk into someone's living room and offer them something that no one else can offer. right? Especially if you're doing this third category, because Redfin's never going to do what I'm going to do because they don't put the money behind it that we put behind it. And I can tell you, I've had multiple projects where we spent up to $300,000 on the rehab, but it then made the seller an extra 100 grand or an extra 150 grand or whatever after we got paid back, right? Now, I don't want to give anyone a heart attack thinking you got to make sure you got 300 grand laying around, but there are ways to do this in a cost-effective way. So let's kind of dive in by category, right? List ready. This is what every agent on the planet is going to encourage their client to do, and in most cases encourage them to do it with their money, right? If it's a retail seller and you walk in and you say, gosh, you really need to have a landscaper come in, do you have $500 to have a landscaper come in and put down beauty bark or whatever, right? So the advantages are it's pretty limited and easy to identify. It's the least expensive, right? And because it's the smallest scope, it also can be completed the fastest. And in most cases, the sellers, if you give them the advice that shows them that's money well spent, they'll put up that sum of money because it's only, a couple grand at the most, right? Now, the downside is you're not maximizing the ROI, right? There's probably other things that could be done that would give a return on investment, but you're using the seller's money, so you don't want to overspend the seller's money, right? Unless the seller's independently wealthy, which some of them are, right? So now let's talk about prehab, right? Still a fairly small and easily identified level of project, right? Because now it's not that we choose things that are harder to identify. It's that we are now choosing things that are more expensive that we might have skipped. Like, I'm not going to tell somebody to recarpet their house when they're telling me they don't have much money, right? This is more similar to the REO world, right? This is where you're taking care of things that have an ROI and also could potentially be an issue at appraisal. And so you're suggesting to the asset manager, hey, let's make this lender lendable, and therefore it means we got to do these 6 things or whatever it is, right? Now, disadvantages, it can be more expensive. So unless it's an asset manager, if it's a retail seller, that seller may not have that money, right? It could be 10 or 15 or even 30 grand, depending on the scope of work. And a lot of retail sellers don't have that kind of money laying around, right? This is where, when I come in, I have a differentiator because we'll put up the 30 grand in my example. And all we do is we front the money, we get paid out of closing. And so all we're doing is lending that money for some period of weeks, depending on the size of the scope of the project and how long it takes to sell. And we don't charge interest, right? Because the minute you start charging interest, you're under a whole new regulatory oversight, and we don't want to do that. So what we do is we charge a construction management fee. So if I'm going to do $25,000 worth of work, I might charge a $5,000 construction management fee. It's not interest, it's construction management, right? And so I invoice for it, I disclose it, the owner of the home authorizes it, and we get to work, right? And I'm going to walk through the agreements you would need if you're going to implement something like this. But that's where you start to separate yourself from the competition, because these are bigger projects, more expensive, and most agents don't have the horsepower to do that, right? Now, full rehab, this is 100% what can you do that would dial up this house and be supported with comps, right? So the key for all of us in doing these analyses is as is valuation, as repaired valuation, and the comps to support each, plus an accurate scope of work, right? Now, I mean, think of how many times your asset manager has said, tell me more about your repairs. In the BPO, you've expressed that I should do X, Y, and Z. Do I really have to? And is this the real cost? Well, if you've worked construction in the past, like I have, you get pretty good at forecasting what the expenses are going to be. If you don't have that skill set, but you have a partner general contractor, now your BPOs are more accurate. Well, this is the same drill, right? It's get in there, figure out what needs to be done, maybe what some of the risks are, because there's going to be things inside the walls that you can't see, knob and tube or whatever, right? And then you put together an accurate scope of work. Now, we only recommend people do these things when there's a minimum ROI of at least 30%. So, every asset management company will tell you, if I'm going to invest $1, I need to make $1.25 or whatever it is. Some of them will say, I don't need to make money. I've had a couple different companies tell me their posture is, if I put $1 in, I want to get it back, but I want the home to sell faster, right? And it's our job as professionals to be able to identify, are these repairs going to return an investment, or are they just going to make it sell faster? And then make recommendations based on that, right? So pros and cons of a full rehab, obviously it's more expensive and it takes longer, right? But what it does is it allows the realtor who comes into that living room to make their pitch to be able to look the seller in the eye and say, I'm going to be able to give you fully objective advice that you can then decide if it makes sense for you. And one thing I always say is, I'm a big believer the numbers should compel you, right? If I put options in front of you, as is prehab and rehab, and the numbers don't jump off the page at you, that probably means you should sell it as is, right? Because it's just not compelling enough. And I'm okay with that, right? I want what's best for you, and it's your job, Mr. Seller, to decide what that is. All I'm here to do is to give you absolute clarity about what your options are and what the return on investment would be under each scenario. And we actually put together a side-by-side comparison for people so they can go, okay, if I go list ready, I'm going to sell for $800,000. If I go prehab, it's going to cost me 25 grand, but then I'm going to sell for 850. That's a pretty good ROI. But if I go full rehab, it's going to cost me 100 grand, but I might get to $1 million then, right? Or whatever it is. And then we calculate the ROIs for them. Does that all make sense? Now that I've muted everybody. So here's the way we pitch it, right? Hey, Mr. Seller, how'd you like to flip your home with our money and you keep the profit? How do you say no to that, right? Think about it. The consumer's decision is, do I sell, in 3 weeks because of marketing time and closing time? Do I sell in 3 weeks and get 100 grand? Or do I sell in 8 weeks and get 200 grand? And I don't have to come out of pocket for a penny. Then they decide, right? If it's time sensitive, they'll go, I'm not going to do the longer range one. I'm going to do the short term one. That's fine, right? But think of the power of the relationship and how much stronger it is when you have now turned the table and you're now on the same side of the table as they are, right? And you're an advocate, an advisor, and you're showing them, hey, we can do this and you're going to make this, or we can do this and you'll make this and it'll take this amount of time, or we can do this and you'll make this and it'll take this amount of time. And they're able to go, I understand, and to me, this middle one is the best option, or whatever, right? This is a screen grab straight from my website, right? I'm just going to show you the pitch, right? Leverage our 10 years of home rehabilitation for profit, except you make the profit. Leverage our relationships with cost-effective contractors. Leverage our expertise to select exactly what to do and, more importantly, what not to do. We won't recommend a repair if we can't demonstrate a return on investment. No job too small or too big. We agree on the scope of work and take care of it start to finish. $0 out of pocket, all improvements paid for at closing, and 0% interest. If your home is anything other than tip-top condition, how do you say no to this, right? Or at least how do you say, okay, well, do your analysis and tell me what I would make, right? Because there's no downside for them. So here's the players, right? First one is the agents. They're the ones that are going to find you the properties, and you're going to put together a marketing campaign if you choose. In fact, I think, oh yeah, no, it's on this page. I thought it was on the last. Right? So now your agents, if you have a team like I do, we have listing agents and we have buyers agents. We load up our listing agents with listing leads, and we get a bigger split because we're generating the opportunity for them. Right? Now they can walk into every home and give that consumer that. Sharon, did you just kick me out of my own Zoom meeting?
No, how would I have done that?
I'm kidding.
Are you back?
I was like, God, I'm
No,
a terrible job. No, internet fluctuation. Sorry about that.
that's all right.
Sorry, was someone going to ask something? All right, I'm going to keep going. So now they have a differentiator, right? Especially if you're able to fund the full rehab part of it. And they will love the program, right? Because now they go into every house and think, there's no one that's going to be able to touch me. Because unless it's brand new construction, I'm going to be able to help these people with money that they don't have to come up with. So let me show you what this can look like. So if you want to make a note of it, you're welcome to hit my website and just check this out in more detail, but it's just edsmovingconcierge.com, right? And I have my screen shrunk a little bit. And we will create this website for all of our agents so that they can create Sharon's movingconcierge.com, and she can get out there and start marketing and doing Facebook posts about it and all that kind of stuff, right? So there's an opt-in, there's a short video about how it works. There's the thing you saw me screen grab. But when these images load, you'll see that these are all before and after photos. So this house that's on the screen right now, the as-is was 410 grand. We did a 270,000 remodel and then sold it for 810. So even after paying us back and paying selling costs and everything, the seller netted an extra 115,000 bucks on that house. And all they had to do was say, okay, yeah, do it. Didn't have to come out of pocket. Now, if the way I'm describing it makes any of you uncomfortable, what I say to them is, you don't have to come out of pocket, but you are in essence spending your equity to do the rehab. And based on this data, based on these comps, doing that is going to give you a return on investment. And sellers love it, right? The one that's on the screen right now, the as is was 170,000. They owed 185,000. So they were 15 grand underwater, plus selling costs. They would have been 30 grand short to close. So they were a short sale, and not by an insignificant amount of money, right? We did a rehab and then sold it in a day for 325. And they netted almost 90,000 bucks in their pocket. So they went from 30 grand short to close to 90 grand positive. And as you might imagine, somebody who lives in a $170,000 house that's beat to heck, 90 grand is life-changing money. So this deal turns into 100 referrals because the homeowner is so enthusiastic about how the benefit helped them. Does that make sense? You see how that could be really powerful stuff, right? I've had, you know, and they don't have to all be $300,000 rehabs. I've had them where we did less than $5,000. It was carpet and paint, and it was a condo, so there wasn't even landscaping. But as long as we could prove that that would return $7,000, or in this case, it returned almost $20,000, right? The $5,000 just dolling it up netted the seller an extra $20,000, right? So who else is a player? You got the agents finding you the opportunities. Then you got to have the contractor, right? Now, contractors are slammed right now. And it is a selling point for us to be able to go into someone's home and say, hey, I know it's hard to find contractors right now, but our contractor is a captive contractor. He only works on our deals. So I can have him out here tomorrow, and he'll be able to give us a scope of work within a couple days, and he'll tell us when he can get us into his project schedule. But that will be measured in just a couple weeks rather than see in March of next year, right? So that's another selling point. You might even consider getting your general contractor's license. I got mine, and that allows me to be even more compelling when I'm in their living room, right? Hey, I am the contractor. Now, absent of that, you just have to align yourself with one of the GCs that probably has been doing your REO work, right? And just have a conversation. Hey, I'm thinking about putting this program together. I want to steer all the business to you. You can manage the subs, but I just need quick response time out of you. Will you do that for me? And if they're like any of the GCs we work with on the REO side, they'll say, absolutely, right? Because they want your business. They want to keep the existing business and they want to grow it. Now, the last thing is the funding, right? So you have a couple of options, right? If you're in a position to fund it yourself, that makes everything a lot easier. Friends and family, or however you want to do it. Or you got to bring in an investor, right? And you got to figure out with the investor what their ROI is or needs to be. But if you can show them, like, here's the great way to talk about it with investors. I have investors and they say, well, I want to make 20% on my money. And my very first question is annualized, right? And they go, yeah, perfect. Because I'm going to use their money 3 or 4 times, maybe more during the year. I can get them a 20% annualized return. I may or may not be able to get it on a deal by deal basis, right? But have those conversations, because you're going to have to, if it's not your money or your friends and family money, you're going to have to balance what the investor's return needs to be and the construction management fee that your contractor is going to need to make, right? But it can be done. Because think about it. That example was 410 as is, 810 final sales price. Seller made 115 grand. What if they only made 105 grand? Now my investor was able to get 10,000 bucks. That's his return, right? Just avoid charging interest so that you don't have that extra oversight, right? And in your state, make sure you talk to an attorney to make sure you do it right. Like, all of our agreements were drafted by our attorney because we need to make sure that we did it right, right? So the agreements, we have 2 of them. One is the Moving Concierge Agreement. This is an agreement that spells out everything that we are going to do and what their rights are. It also includes, in our state, we have to have them sign a lien release, right? So that we can lien their property if they don't pay. But that's all included in the concierge agreement. And if anyone's thinking about doing this, I'm happy to share ours with you. The other thing we provide is a scope of work. So this is the, hey, these are the 13 things we're going to do and what each of them cost. And the management fee is on there, right? And then we have them sign that, so they can't claim that they didn't know they were paying a construction management fee. So we get their signature on both of these agreements only after we've had a back and forth on what should the scope of work include. And sometimes there's some gray area, you know, like I have one I'm doing right now, and there's a bathroom in there. It's a like 70-year-old home, but it's got a bathroom that was redone. So you could redo it so that all the colors matched the rest of the house that we redid, or you could leave it, even though it doesn't match exactly. And so we had that conversation. And as a realtor, I had to explain, well, here's what the impact on resale is going to be, right? And the way I explained that example was, well, if we don't do the bathroom and so it looks different than the rest of the house, that's going to shrink the buyer pool, right? Because you can't really quantify how much of a downward pressure on price does that have, but you can quantify that it's going to make a certain percentage of buyers go, well, I don't want it because I'd have to redo that bathroom as soon as I bought it, right? And so we kicked that around and we decided, you know what? For the money, it's better to redo it and make it match. So we did. But it's easier to redo a bathroom when you're tearing apart the rest of the house, right? I mean, that one that we sold for $810, we took it down to the studs. That house was shrouded in trees, and the tree limbs were using the roof like a dartboard for years. So there was water damage, and there was tree limbs sticking through the ceiling in multiple places in the house. It was kind of a disaster. It's as easy as that. Look at that. All right, I've been talking a lot. Let me open it up to questions if there are any. And I'd love to know if people think this is something they might do in their markets. Did I mute everybody?
Hey, Ed, I have a question.
Please.
So, have you ever gotten burned doing that before? Have you actually had to file a lien and, recoup your money? Because, like, if they change their mind about selling or it doesn't sell, so how do you handle those?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's funny. It's never a question from homeowners, but it's always a question from realtors. No, we've never been burned. There are definitely clients where multiple times along the way you're reminding them of their obligation to sell, because they'll start seeing it come together, and they're like, man, my house has never looked that good. If it looked that good, I wouldn't move. Well, I appreciate you saying that. We're doing a good job. I agree. But remember, we're putting it on the market in 2 weeks or whatever it is. So we haven't had it burn us, but there's definitely people that maybe start to fall back in love with their home. But to be honest, Sharon, I try and sort of suss that out at the beginning, because before, we ever get into getting the contractor in there and getting the scope of work going, they'll make noises like, that they don't really want to move or whatever. And so I just dig into that. It's sales 101 to get after a person's emotional why, right? What is your why in this? Well, I want to be closer to my kids or grandkids, or the house is just too big now, or whatever. If their why isn't strong enough, there's a much greater risk that they're going to fall in love with it when we deck it out, right? So we'll figure that out, and then we'll really dig into it. And if they aren't convicted to the process, then we won't do it, because we don't want to get strung out or hung up.
Okay, great. Yeah. No, and the reason I guess I asked that is we stage, or if homes need it, we'll stage our listings. And most of the time, the sellers are like, well, gosh, if I had known this house could look that good, I wouldn't have even be looking to move. And I'm like, well, but you know, this is a staging to sell your home.
Right.
So I've never had anybody back out, but they're like, gosh, could you do this to my new house? And I'm like, yes, I'd love to come help you. So it does,
That's a
it kind
good,
of turns into another opportunity to work with your clients.
absolutely. Yeah. And I take it as a compliment when they fall back in love with their house. We just have to make sure they know that it's looking that good because it's never been lived in with all these new finishes and materials and everything. And so far so good. But we do in the moving concierge agreement, they actually initial in like 3 different places that they are not moving back in, and we do require that they vacate if it's a rehab of any size, because we don't want them to have to live in a dusty environment, and we don't want to have to work around them. And we'll tell people that, don't have a place to go. Well, then let's analyze it, see if we could do the work with you staying in there. But we have yet to be able to do that. It's conceivable, right? Like we could rehab part of the house and they could live in the other part. But more often than not, here's one thing I didn't even put in the presentation. I should have. Is in our calculations, we can build into it that we're going to rent an apartment for them, right? If I want to put in the scope of work that it includes 6 months of rental at $1,200 a month, I can do that. It just changes the ROI, right? And if it's their money, I'm fronting it, but I'm getting it paid back when we close. If it makes the ROI, undesirable, I'll point it out to them and go, gosh, there's $7,200 in here for the rental. Are you sure there isn't a family member or someone you could move in with? Because that swings the ROI from negative to positive, or from below 20% to over 25, or whatever it is, right? We just talk it through, but there is that flexibility. You can plug into that anything you want: storage, moving, rental, whatever. It just has to deliver a return. So I hope that helps. Scott Seidler, you came off mute. Did you have any questions?
I honestly, I stepped in a little late. I heard from about 15 minutes into current, and I've for years been.
Oh,
Sorry about that. Hit an inbound call. Been working on renovation projects with both private owners and with the Fannie Mae inventory that I have, and
yeah.
For the last few years, it's been difficult to prior years because in our particular area, we've got some very pricey custom home building happening, and that was compounded by a Category 5 hurricane,
Yeah.
which did more lucrative type of work for the contractors, and we have very low inventory on resources to tap that we can rely upon to produce. And that's being felt in a very severe way here, and it's been that way for a while. So they're pricey, they're not available. You got to schedule them way out. But I have seen this. The approach definitely absolutely works. We've brought a lot of value to a lot of different homes over the years for both private owners and REO owners, and it is a way to to get them to sing your praise and to keep a good pipeline and referrals coming.
That's exactly right, Scott. That is the biggest benefit, is the trailing referrals and enthusiasm. We pound social media with not only before and afters, but durings, like coming soon type images, and people start to get excited, like, hey, can you do that to my house? And I don't say on social media, no, only if you're moving out. I say, yeah, when can I come over? Right? Because that gets me an opportunity to get into a conversation and then find out, okay, well, I could steer some of my subs to somebody if it helped them and made my subs some money. And, you know, we want to help people in the end. And that's what we do. So I love that you're doing it. This is really just kind of putting a packaging around it that allows you and your agents to go out and promote it more and do more and help more. So.
Well, and Ed, I think one of the cool things about this is one of the skills that an REO agent uses with their corporate clients and bank clients every day. And so you guys are just really leveraging a skill from the REO side to work on the traditional side, which you have to be able to do, especially when volume is down and we're not receiving what we're used to receiving. So it's a good way to take those skills and leverage it. And then when volume comes back, and your clients will know that, they haven't been giving you anything, but you can also share with them, I've been applying my REO skills on the traditional side, so I still have my contacts and my vendors to do what needs to be done on your properties. So I think it's a great way of handling your business for a multitude of reasons.
Absolutely, Sharon. And you know what else it has done, at least in our business, is it's expanded that list of subcontractors. Because, you get into a project and you've got your stable of painters, and we've had sellers who say, I want you to use my son-in-law. And we don't automatically say we will, but we'll tell him, we'll talk to him and we'll check out some of his previous work. And we end up adding the son-in-law to our list, their stable of painters, because they do good work. So our vendor database now is over 200 different subcontractors, and they do everything from, framing and roofing and the normal stuff, but repointing chimneys, or electricians that specialize in septic systems, or fill in the blank. You come across these needs, and then you talk to your subs about, hey, who do you know that does blank? And now all of a sudden you got another sub to add to your stable of subs. So, well, I'm going to stop recording.